It seemed like any other typical day at a high-end retail store. Employees were moving efficiently between displays of luxury designer clothes, maintaining a polished and professional demeanor. However, beneath the surface, something far darker had been brewing, unnoticed by many. This store was renowned for its elegance, high-end products, and impeccable service, but there was a troubling undertone lurking in its operations, something only a few had detected, and none had dared to confront. That was all about to change. Michael Dawson, the African-American CEO of the entire retail chain, had built his business from the ground up with hard work and dedication. Known for his sharp business acumen, strong leadership, and, most importantly, his commitment to fairness, Michael had always prided himself on running an inclusive company. However, lately, he had started hearing unsettling rumors within his stores. There were murmurs of discrimination, hushed reports of racist behavior that seemed to appear only when black customers walked through the doors. The complaints were not frequent, but they were consistent enough that Michael couldn't ignore them. Deciding to address the issue directly, he knew if he entered the store as himself, the employees would behave differently. The employees would be on their best behavior. They either respected him or feared his authority as their CEO. But Michael wasn't interested in seeing how they acted around their boss. He wanted to witness the truth, to understand how deep the problem of racism ran in his own store. So, he came up with a plan no one would expect. With the help of a skilled makeup artist, he completely transformed his appearance. His skin tone was changed, a wig disguised his usual clean-cut hairstyle, and his usual tailored suit was replaced with simple, understated clothing. When he looked into the mirror, even Michael barely recognized the man staring back at him. He was ready. Michael entered the store as just another customer, blending in with the crowd. No one paid him any special attention. There were no respectful nods from the staff, no warm welcomes that the store was known for. At first, everything seemed normal. He wandered through the store, browsing the racks, picking up a few items and waiting for an employee to assist him. But soon, he noticed a subtle yet undeniable shift in attitude. A nearby employee glanced at him with disdain and quickly turned away, as if his presence was unwelcome, when Michael asked for assistance. The reaction was immediate and cold. One of the employees, a tall man named Brian, sighed in frustration as he approached, his expression filled with annoyance. "What do you need?" Brian asked, his tone flat and dismissive. Michael inquired if a particular jacket came in a different size, to which Brian barely glanced at the item before replying, "I doubt you can afford that. Maybe try looking in a different section." Michael was stunned. It wasn't just the words, although they were harsh enough. It was the disdain in Brian's eyes, the assumption that, based on his appearance, Michael didn't belong there. He continued through the aisles, determined to see if this attitude was an isolated incident. But each employee he encountered treated him the same way. They avoided eye contact, spoke to him with condescending tones, and acted as though his presence was an inconvenience. When he finally went to the register to make a purchase, the cashier, a young woman named Sarah, made a deliberate effort to handle his money with as little physical contact as possible. It wasn't just one employee, and it wasn't just one moment. Every person in the store had treated him with the same quiet contempt. Every employee Michael encountered displayed the same ugly, racist behavior. They had no idea that the man they were belittling, the man they were subtly trying to push out of the store, was the very person who signed their paychecks. By the end of his shopping experience, Michael stood at the front of the store, absorbing the full impact of what he had just witnessed. It was worse than he had feared. The racism was systemic, ingrained in every interaction he experienced. He had seen enough. Once home, he removed the makeup and let the weight of the situation sink in. The next morning, Michael arrived at the store as his usual self. Sharp suit, polished shoes, and a calm but determined look on his face. The employees straightened up noticeably when they saw him enter, a stark contrast to how they had treated him just the day before. He called for an immediate staff meeting. Confused but respectful, every employee gathered in the back of the store, unsure of what was to come. As Michael stood before them, his expression was serious. "I need to talk to all of you about something very important," he began, his voice steady, though the intensity in his eyes made everyone focus. "Yesterday, I came into this store as a customer, not as your CEO, but as an ordinary person who wanted to shop here," Michael began. A murmur of confusion rippled through the employees. Brian shifted uncomfortably, and Sarah looked puzzled, but no one said a word. "I disguised myself," Michael continued. "I made myself look like someone you wouldn't recognize, and what I experienced was deeply disturbing." The room grew tense as Michael described the events from the day before. He didn't call out any specific names yet, but he recounted the condescending tones, the dismissive attitudes, and the blatant racial bias that had tainted every interaction. "I'm not just disappointed," he said, his voice quieter but no less commanding. "I'm angry. Angry that this kind of behavior is happening in my store. Angry that you believe it's acceptable to treat people differently based on the color of their skin." Now, the room was dead silent. Some employees stared wide-eyed in shock, while others cast their eyes down, unable to meet Michael's gaze. Brian's face had turned pale, and Sarah nervously bit her lip, realizing the weight of what was happening. Sarah, fully aware that she had been part of the problem, couldn't meet Michael's gaze. "And I'm not going to tolerate this," Michael said firmly. "This ends today." But Michael didn't stop with just words. He wanted his employees to truly understand the harm they had caused, to feel the weight of the discrimination they had so easily inflicted. "Starting tomorrow," he announced, "each of you will undergo an experience of your own. You will be transformed, just as I was. You'll be disguised as black customers, and I will take you to various stores and establishments where you'll face the same kind of treatment you've been dishing out." The employees were stunned. No one dared to speak up, but the expressions on their faces revealed their fear and anxiety. They were terrified of what was to come. Michael remained unmoved. He knew this was the only way to truly make them understand. The next day, one by one, each employee underwent the same transformation that Michael had experienced. They were disguised as black men and women and sent out into the world with Michael by their side. The roles had now reversed, and they were the ones who. They now faced the dismissive stares, the cold indifference, and outright racism. In clothing stores, they were ignored. At restaurants, they were seated in the back or not served at all. In convenience stores, they were followed, questioned about their intentions, treated like criminals before they even spoke a word. By the end of the day, the employees were shattered. Brian, who had been so arrogant just days earlier, was visibly shaken. Sarah had tears in her eyes. They had all felt the sting of racism firsthand, and it had broken something inside them. When they returned to the store, Michael gathered them together once more. "Now you know," he said quietly. "Now you've felt it. The pain, the humiliation, the anger. This is what you've been putting people through day after day, and it ends now." The employees nodded, some too overwhelmed to speak. Brian stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't realize. I didn't understand." Michael looked at him, his expression softening just a little. "It's not enough to be sorry, Brian. You need to change. All of you do, and I'm going to help you do that." From that day forward, the store underwent a transformation. Michael introduced new training programs focused on empathy, respect, and the importance of treating every customer with dignity, regardless of who they were or where they came from. But he didn't stop there. Every week, after the store closed, the employees spent an hour working with local organizations to identify other businesses with similar racist practices. They partnered with lawyers, law enforcement, and activists to help eliminate discrimination wherever it thrived, turning their own mistakes into a force for positive change. It was a long journey, but in time, the employees changed. They learned, they grew, and under Michael's leadership, they became advocates for equality, using their experiences to educate others. As the weeks turned into months, Michael and his team continued their mission to eradicate racism in their community. After each workday, they dedicated time to their broader mission, tracking down businesses, stores, and restaurants where discriminatory practices had been reported. Some business owners and employees denied the accusations, while others reacted defensively. But Michael and his now enlightened team had something powerful on their side: empathy and lived experience. Together, they visited each establishment, initiating conversations that were often uncomfortable but absolutely necessary. They spoke from the heart, sharing the pain they had felt during their undercover experiences. Slowly, they began to change minds, not through force or aggression, but through the power of understanding and compassion. One evening, after the store had closed, Michael gathered the team for one of their regular debrief sessions. The group had become more than just co-workers. They were a family, united by a common purpose. Brian, who had been the most resistant at the start of this journey, spoke up, sharing details of an encounter he had earlier that day. "I went to this coffee shop that had been reported for turning away black customers," Brian began, his tone more humble than it had ever been. "At first, the owner didn't want to listen, but I just kept talking. I told him what it felt like being on the receiving end of it, how it breaks you down, little by little." Derek paused, his voice softening. And then something changed in his eyes. He got quiet and actually apologized. He said he didn't realize how bad it was. The room was silent as Brian spoke, but it was a silence filled with pride and hope. This was what they had been striving for, not just calling out racism, but inspiring real change. They were making a difference, one step at a time. In the months that followed, they didn't stop. They continued visiting businesses, speaking with owners, and sharing their personal stories. Each time they left a shop, they left behind seeds of change. Slowly but surely, the discriminatory practices in their local area began to fade. Racist attitudes were being challenged, not just by Michael's team, but by other members of the community who had been inspired by their efforts. One night, Michael sat at his desk reviewing reports. They had managed to reach nearly every business in the surrounding areas. Most had made noticeable improvements, and in some cases, the change was truly remarkable. Racist signs had been removed, customer service policies had been rewritten, and staff members had undergone diversity and inclusion training. It was real, measurable progress. But Michael knew it wasn't enough. The fight against racism wasn't something that could be won in just a few months. It was an ongoing struggle that required continuous effort and vigilance. Though they had made significant strides in their local community, Michael was well aware that the problem extended far beyond the borders of their town. "We've done great work," Michael said to his team one afternoon, addressing them with pride. "But this is just the beginning. We've made changes here in our community, but we all know the world is much bigger than this. Racism is still out there in places we haven't reached yet, but we've shown that change is possible." The employees nodded, their faces full of renewed determination. They had come so far, and now they were ready to go even further. Michael paused, allowing his words to sink in before he continued. "We may not be able to fix the world overnight," Michael continued, "but if we keep doing what we've been doing, one person at a time, one business at a time, then maybe, just maybe, this will grow. The change will spread, and one day we'll look around and realize that what started here has reached places we never thought possible." The employees exchanged glances, feeling the enormity of the task ahead, but also the hope that came with it. They knew the journey wasn't over, and they were ready for whatever came next. In the years that followed, the impact of Michael's efforts began to ripple outward. Word of their mission spread to nearby towns, then to cities. Other businesses began reaching out, asking for guidance on how to implement the same changes. Some even requested to undergo the same undercover experience that Michael's employees had gone through, wanting to personally feel the effects of racism so they could better understand how to fight it. Michael's company had evolved into more than just a retail store. It had become a symbol of progress, a beacon for change. His employees, once blind to their own prejudices, had become advocates for equality. They trained other businesses, spoke at events, and continued their mission long after their original goals were met. Years later, as Michael looked out over the city he loved, he knew the work was far from over. There were still pockets of discrimination, still areas that needed to be addressed. But he also knew they had started something that wouldn't stop even after they were gone. The seeds of change they had planted would continue to grow, and with each new generation, the fight for equality would carry on. As the team gathered one last time, now years into their mission, Brian stood up, speaking for everyone. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with both pride and humility. "And we'll keep going because we've learned that change doesn't stop. It's a lifelong commitment. But now, thanks to you, boss, we know what's possible." Michael smiled. "Together, we've made a difference," he said quietly, "and we'll keep doing it, one step at a time." They didn't have all the answers, but they had hope. And sometimes hope was enough to change the world.